So jumping back into Jamestown, like I was saying in the previous video, Jamestown, is tough because the situation there is tough geographically, meaning you're living in a marsh. It's tough to grow food, and specifically when they got there, I think they really underestimated the winter. And it just becomes a kind of an issue because they're just not prepared at all for the winter. People are dying. There's no leadership. There's no food. The relationships with Native Americans are not great. And then this one thing comes and saves the colony. And the thing that's going to save the colony is going to be this thing called tobacco, right? So it says the only thing that kept the colony from completely failing was tobacco. Virginia's climate was perfect for its growth. So colonists in the South became extremely wealthy, cultivating tobacco for European consumers. Now, hopping on your colonial Virginia back on our packet, it's economic development. So it says, originally the settlers of Jamestown planned to get wealthy by discovering rumored abundances of what precious metal, and that's gold. Remember, the Virginia Company is going there to make money. They have this idea and this kind of mindset that they're going to go there and they're going to make gold. Which none was found, which cash crop did the colony turn to? And that is tobacco. Okay, so how did the geography of Virginia foster the development and growth of tobacco plantation system? So this is the thing. They have fertile soil, right, because of their access to rivers and waterways. However, they have a long growing season, right? So this means that usually your spring all the way until your fall is usually pretty long, and you have pretty good weather. You could definitely see this in the South, right? Especially where we live, which is Georgia, when they grow cotton and other sorts of products. So it says, originally planters relied on indentured servants to help the growing tobacco farms. And then it says, what is an indentured servant? Okay, so this is kind of getting ahead here, so I'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Some pictures of tobacco if you've never seen it. Now, we're going to hop into the development of slavery. So it says, initially tobacco farmers, it says reliable, but it should be relied on indentured servants to help cultivate and harvest the tobacco crop. So what is an indentured servant? And the second bullet point kind of hits on that. So it says, in order to pay off debts, people would become indentured servants. They would they would work for a set amount of years or time until the debt was usually paid off through labor. So this is like 7 years. So the idea is to come over to the New World for this opportunity. It's expensive, and a lot of people don't have money to fund their journey here. So what happens is you have these plantation farmers who have these large plantations for tobacco crops and stuff like that. They are going to say, hey, you know what? I will pay for your journey, but in order for me to pay for your journey, you're going to have to work for me for 7 years or whatever the set amount of time is that they agreed on. After that agreement, they are free to go. All right, so this is not slavery, because slavery is for life, meaning when you are a slave, the idea is you are going to be a part of that family or that master's workforce until you pass, and then your kids will be a part of that. It is a lifelong investment. So I want you to kind of have the difference between the two. But let's hop back into the indentured servant atmosphere. I said after you serve your work and your time period, you are free. All right. So now why would people want to pay indentured service? Number one, they're making a lot of tobacco, so it is very, you need a lot of labor, you need a lot of people to work the field, and the people that own the land can't work at all of it themselves. And you don't want to pay somebody because the idea is you want to make as much money as possible. So think about it like this. McDonald's, all right? McDonald's pays their workers minimum wage. Why? Because they understand that the more money that they pay their workers, the less money that McDonald's makes, right? Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is they're going to try to pay in an individual the least amount of money as possible. So in their brain, they're going, okay, I'm paying for their price to come over here. In return, I'm getting 7 years of labor for free. I'm just paying the front end. All right. Now, here's what happens. It says, as time passed, more indentured servants fulfilled their labor and requirements, and they were granted their freedom. All right. Now, here's the thing. When they grant their freedom, what are they going to do? Well, what do they know how to do best? That is work the tobacco field. So what are they going to do? They're going to go try to get some property. They're going to go try to get some land, and they are going to try to work those fields. And they're going to, now what this does is when they get their own field, now their original boss has lost labor and he has competition within the market, right? If I'm growing tobacco and Joe Schmo across the street is growing tobacco, we inherently are in competition with each other because we're both growing tobacco. All right, so this is what happens. It says, to make up for their labor shortage, tobacco cultivators in Jamestown began importing African slaves to work for free on these ever-growing plantations. All right, so you're going to see this switch to slavery. So as you kind of think about, how did slavery get to the United States? Some of you may have no idea. This is it. They needed a workforce that was going to work for a low cost, which is free under slavery, right? So let's kind of jump back over here to our packet real quick and answer some questions. Now it says, originally they relied on whom? And that's indentured servants, right? So it says, what is an indentured servant? So it's a servant who signs a contract to work, right? So meaning, I'm going to work for you for X amount of years, turn the page. Once those years are done, you grant me my freedom. And you're thinking, well, what do they get out of that? Well, what they get is they get their trip paid from England to the United States, or to the colonies, excuse me. So this is huge because without this, they would not be able to come over here, right? Now, it's going to cost them some years to work, but it's an opportunity for them nonetheless. Okay. Number 5 says, as the indentured servants began fulfilling their obligations, where did tobacco farmers look to help work on their tobacco plantations? And that is slaves. All right, so slaves. So this is your fast 5 here. So it says, what was the first attempted English colony in America? Right, that's going to be Roanoke. I slightly mentioned that. And then it says, what was the first permanent English colony? That's going to be your Jamestown. Okay, give one example of representative democracy in the early colonies. What crop helped save it? That is going to be tobacco. And then who is the instrumental leadership of the Jamestown colony? All right. So again, early Jamestown. So in the beginning, Native Americans were reluctant to help the colonists survive and adapt to these harsh living conditions. Chief Powhatan, he's going to be a Native American chief who's going to oversee and sustain relationships with Jamestown settlers. Most famously is going to be John Smith. So when you're thinking about, Pocahontas, and you're thinking about, their relationship with the Native Americans, you need to think John Smith. Why? Because he's in the movie. And guess what? Guess who Chief Powhatan's daughter is? That is Pocahontas. Okay, so it all kind of comes full circle here. So Chief Powhatan convinced the natives to create a peaceful relationship with the Jamestown settlers, one founded and sustained by trade. All right, so you got to think about it. In return to the Native Americans teaching these colonists how to effectively live in their environment and their current situation, these colonists have things, tools, guns, weapons that they have never seen before, and that they understand are powerful and that they understand can advance their society and culture. So what do? They swap. They give them information. In return, they give them products that they would like to use in their villages and tribes. So it says, however, peace would not last between the natives and the settlers over territorial disputes to expand tobacco cultivation. So this is a good point here to talk about something. So as these individuals create these tobacco plantations, they're going to start making a lot of money. Well, guess what? When you start making money, what's the one thing you want more of? Money. So what they end up doing is they're going to end up trying to expand. Well, here's the thing. The Native Americans don't necessarily have their land marked off because that's not how their culture believes it should happen. The Native Americans' culture believes that the land is for everybody, and they are one with the land, and they are one with the animals, and they are one with the spirit, and it is kind of used for everybody so that they have the ability to, not only migrate with the animals and the herd and stuff like that, but it's shared amongst the people. The English colonists do not believe like that. If you ever wonder why towns are set up or neighborhoods or the idea of private property, there you go. So they're going to want more territory, and the Native Americans are kind of like, we really don't want you coming into our land, right? So that becomes a larger issue. This little picture here is going to be a map of the Native American tribes that are kind of, in the colonies at this time. All right, there's Chief Powhatan. All right, so I kind of went over this, the reasons for struggle, the reasons for success and for growth. And, if you want to fill in your boxes, then you're more than welcome to from our PowerPoint from the other day. Now, here's the kind of expansion, right? And this is kind of the issue of what's going on. So as the colonists expanded their tobacco plantations farther from the coast, they took more and more land from the Native Americans, which is going to cause intense fighting. Now, William Berkeley, who is the governor of Virginia, is only going to increase these hostilities of settlers by raising taxes on the poor planters. All right, so these taxes that were, instead of being used for communal benefits, like today our taxes are used for making sure that people who rely on taxes get paid as far as jobs go, right? So I'm a government employee. Teachers get paid through taxes. Police officers get paid through taxes. Firefighters, all sorts of stuff like that, because we work for the government. If you wonder why are certain roads, it seems to be, are always getting paved, that's because your taxes pay for that, right? The idea is these taxes are the things that are kind of keeping your community up and running. Now, it says these taxes were given heavily as rewards for political allies of Berkeley in the House of Burgesses. So here's the problem is you have some kind of scandal. Now, in England, this would pass no problem. A lot of people, even if they did have an issue, wouldn't be able to rise against it because they are not as strong as Parliament, right? Well, there's going to be an event called Bacon's Rebellion. So in 1675, Virginia settlers sought support from Berkeley in exterminating all of the colony's natives. And what that means is these indentured servants are going to get free. They're going to want land. And Berkeley's going to say, you know what, I'm not giving it to you. I'm just not going to sacrifice these Native Americans for the expansion of you, especially because the rich, which are his friends, which are the people that put him in office, are going to not want the competition within the market, right? Kind of makes sense. So it says, in response to the governor's apathy on the issue, a planter named Nathaniel Bacon took matters into his own hands. And Nathaniel Bacon is why it's called Bacon's Rebellion. So Bacon and his supporters began slaughtering natives in an effort to take their land and protect their frontier planters. He felt Berkeley had no concern for the poor farmers and favored Virginia's wealthy. Now here's the problem. It's a small detail that's kind of left out. Nathaniel Bacon is going to be asking for land, and these poor planters are going to be asking for land because they're trying to make more money so that they can make a decent standard of living in the colonies at this time. And Bacon's going to say, no, I'm not going to give you all land. I'm not going to solve your issues with the natives. But the issue is these aristocrats or these wealthy individuals from Europe or England specifically that want to come into the colonists or the colonies, he's going to give them land. He's going to help them become free as far as their issues with the Native Americans. And Nathaniel Bacon is not going to be very, very happy about this. All right, so what happens is when Governor Berkeley protested against the actions of Bacon and his men, Bacon's going to march into Jamestown, and he's going to eventually drive out the governor. Bacon's Rebellion is going to lose power after Bacon dies, but the important thing is, and this is the third bullet point, and this is like the most important thing, is this rebellion is going to show that poor farmers are not going to tolerate a government that caters only to the wealthy. And this is more importantly the first example in colonial America in which the citizens themselves attempt to overthrow a government that they deem unjust. And this is very important as we advance through the next lecture.